All right, guys, I don't have the book in front of me, but it was Confessions by Leo Tolstoy. Leo Tolstoy, he lived in the 19th century. It's when he lived out his life as an adult. I guess I could check it out, but he was a novelist. I didn't know this, but in his Confessions, I was reading another book, and it quoted Leo Tolstoy's Confessions. So I was like, let me read that. I read it. I said, well, the book, the publisher, which is Penguin Classics, it was Confessions and Other Religious Writings. So I believe he wrote War and Peace. When was that published? In 1867. 82 years old. He died in 1910. So he was around like 40s and 50s when he published his first. It's a huge novel. It's about 1,200 pages. It could be a little more or less. I know it's close to 1,000 pages, more or less. Awesome book. There's one part of it. It's sort of historical. It's one part of it. It's a lot of narration. It's about like the aristocratic society in Russia at the time when a war is going on. The young men who commit themselves to the Russian army when Napoleon and France were invading. They were trying to take over Moscow, but they failed. One part of the book, maybe like the third quarter of the book, it goes for nearly like 100 and something pages. Just like this historical rhetoric, historical writing, depiction of kind of where Napoleon went wrong. Anyway, you read it. It's really good. War and Peace. Another one he has is Anna Karenina. So between 1875 and 1877, so Anna Karenina was published 1878, obviously like 10, 15 years after. 1864 it said when War and Peace was published. So in 1878 was when Anna Karenina. I haven't read Anna Karenina, but it's also really huge. I'm looking forward to reading that. I'm just reading a bunch of other things right now. I have a little headache, but so in this Confessions, he's already much older. He's I think nearly 80 years old. He died at the age of 82. So he writes Confessions at a time when he's successful. I guess he owns some land out in he owns some like land. He has land. So has a house, he has a family, a wife, and maybe some children. Maybe they're older already. Maybe they live on that land. And he's already successful at this time. Between him and Dostoevsky was another really famous Russian author. But Dostoevsky was sort of poor, right? He was a gambler. A lot of times he wrote just to pay off his debts. He wrote to pay off his gambling debts. He also wrote just to fulfill his contracts. At that time, you would sign a contract. All right, well, you're signed a contract to me. I'm the publisher. You owe me like 4 or 5 novels, let's just say. So he never, only posthumous. After his death would he become famous, would people really respect him. He was just man of vices. Russia was pretty wild at that time. So during Confessions, going back to Leo Tolstoy. So Leo Tolstoy, while he lived, he lived through his success, right? His monetary, his fame. There was value in his work that pertained to his actual life on Earth. While he was living, he reaped the benefits of his success while he was alive. But when he writes in Confessions, he says he sort of doesn't know the meaning to life. He's older. He says he's sort of depressed. Life seems meaningless. He's thinking about wanting to kill himself. And so that's what that's what's called Confessions. He confesses his what's going on with him at that time. He talks about like what's the meaning of life. He says, sometimes it's just to work. It's sort of Solomon-esque. Solomon in the Bible, who writes Ecclesiastes in the Bible, which I tell people to read all the time. Read Ecclesiastes in the Bible. It's nothing like, it's going to change your life. Serve this God who sees everything. He's going to punish the wicked and those who submit to him. He's going to give you everything and go to heaven. And no. God, Ecclesiastes can actually pertain to your life. It's not mystical. It's sort of practical if you think about it. It's sort of a novelistic as well. Sort of fictional. But so he also says that he when he was younger, he had some duels. He killed some men in duels. He would start duels. He talks about his life when he was younger. He was just a wild young man, murdering people. I guess he was part of the army too. I guess he committed some, if I can remember right. I know he's talked about duels. He talked about womanizing and like kind of committing crimes, robbing people, sort of, or like swindling people, maybe a certain gambling. Leo Tolstoy lived a full life, man. Interesting guy. So just he's an old man writing confessions, writing about his life, about what's the purpose of life, kind of thinking life's meaningless, and that was like, let's say he died in 82. Let's say that he wrote this around 77 years old, between 77 and 79, because when he comes back to write his religious writings, he talks about, I took 3 years off the last time I wrote my confessions, and the religious writings, the whole time he's talking about God. He's talking about the true God. He talks about how modern day Christianity at that time, the late 19th century, which is only like 150 years ago, not even more than that, which is like yesterday if you think about it. He talks about this just like kind of like there's like a false Christianity being taught, how Christianity is weaponized by those in power, to keep people in line. Just you guys have to read it. It's pretty fascinating. It's philosophical. He does talk about Nietzsche, that Nietzsche's kind of crazy, and he like talks shit about Nietzsche. And Nietzsche's famous. People seem to like Nietzsche. Nietzsche might have been dead at that time. I think Nietzsche died in I don't know, for sure before the 20th century. But he's talking about Nietzsche being sort of liked for the wrong reasons. Nietzsche, I don't know. You have to read it. It's not really difficult to read. It's pretty simple. But again, he says the pure Christianity is like love, and it still makes sense. So it's like that idea in Confessions. He's like, what's the meaning of life? Has no meaning, and everything's kind of like pointless. And like he mentions him striving for fame and having it and succeeding, but still feeling like fucking numb, I guess, and just life has no purpose and meaning. And it's just fascinating. It's pretty fascinating. Just to get his insight to him. Again, I was like a Dostoevsky fan because I did read War and Peace, but it was sort of I don't know, it was brilliant, but it kind of wasn't like, I couldn't really relate in a sense, like Crime and Punishment from Dostoevsky, or Demons by Dostoevsky, or the Brothers Karamazov, like dysfunction, just the dysfunctional side of life. But, War and Peace was more the depiction of the aristocrat, like giving you insight to these families when war started, how they had to evacuate, the young man going to war, the pride in going, just he painted a picture, that like easily a playwright or a screenplay or a movie could have depicted, but he did it with a pen and paper and his mind, which is fascinating, which is why it was so valuable back then, especially at a time when that was pretty much in the early 19th century, and he writes that in like 50 years later from when that invasion happened. And the invasion happened before 1820 for sure, I'm pretty sure. Maybe even sooner, I could be wrong, but yeah. So it just, I was like, Dostoevsky's my guy, but reading this about Tolstoy, it just makes me think like, Tolstoy, he's kind of his own guy, you know. He's his own person. He's his own, you know. People, I mean, I did it, like Tolstoy or Leo Tolstoy or Dostoevsky, you know. They're the two prominent ones. I mean, you have Pushkin. I haven't read much about Pushkin. You do have Gogol wrote Dead Souls, which is a pretty good one. It's pretty interesting. Gives you also insight to kind of what was going on in Russia at that time. um what else do you have? Pushkin. Some other authors as well. But peace.